Our next speaker is one of the most famous journalists who are speaking for Gaza and Palestine, Owen Jones.
It's such an honour to be here. It's such an honour because over the last few months, the lions of the world's press pack, those courageous surviving journalists at Gaza, without them, the horrors, some of the greatest horrors of the 21st century, we wouldn't even be able to know even a fraction of what the Israeli state has unleashed against the people of Gaza. And there's a reason that they have orchestrated the biggest slaughter of journalists in recorded history. They've done so because they know, and that phrase we often hear at protests and demonstrations now for many decades has never been more true, that the whole world is watching. But the whole world has only been able to watch because of the courage and sacrifice of Palestinian journalists as they've been slaughtered one by one, often with their entire families and including their little kids. And when I think over the last few months on so many of the horrors that people like myself have been able to only communicate, often because of journalists who themselves have already been slaughtered, I feel, I'm afraid, this intense and burning fury about the industry in which I work. A Western media which has facilitated this genocide from start to finish. Because what they did from the very beginning, what they did is willfully cover up what the Israeli state was going to do. You know, I interviewed the Israeli-American Associate Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Raz Sigal, this brilliant scholar. And the point he said to me was that it is very rare for a state which commits genocide to be so clear and explicit about its intent from the start. Normally they go to great lengths to cover it up. But the impunity Israel enjoys has meant that they just simply told the world, we don't have to go through leaked documents, we don't have to piece things together, we just have to listen to what Israeli ministers, up to and including Benjamin Netanyahu, politicians, media outlets, generals, soldiers, said from the very start. They said what they were going to do, and they did it. Mass slaughter, holding the entire population collectively guilty, as they put it, the destruction of Gaza, all the rest of it. They promised it. And rather than frame the discussion and coverage of what they did, what they were going to do around that, they willfully hid it. And without those Palestinian journalists on the ground, often juggling, telling the truth to the world as they find food to eat because of the siege of Gaza, like those journalists in northern Gaza eating animal grain to stop their bodies devouring themselves, as they provide the whole world the evidence, the overwhelming evidence of genocide. This is an unforgivable crime. And I've never been more disgusted with Western journalists, because they'll show solidarity with each other when their coverage is questioned, when it comes to them scapegoating migrants and Muslims and refugees. You see them, they get quote tweeted on Twitter by some youngster condemning them for racism, and they think that's them being brave and courageous because they stood up to some besieged minority. Real courage is being the victim of a genocide and then telling the world about it at the same time. And we owe everything to those journalists. And it is up to us, the least we can do is to fight for accountability. And that means holding the Western media and politicians accountable for the mass slaughter of those journalists and the rest of Gaza. But we have to stand on their shoulders because we have this privilege. We're here, we're not being bombed. We're not being starved. We're not having to fight to save our children. We can speak and tell the truth about Gaza. We might be smeared and abused and attacked and threatened, but it isn't the tiniest fraction of what the journalists of Gaza, the lions of the world's press pack, have had to go through. So let's honour those journalists by continuing to speak truth with courage and determination and never, ever been cowed by the threats. And let's make sure that we do justice by never, ever, ever giving up in our fight for accountability, and to make sure all the architects of this are locked up for the rest of their lives, including the people in Downing Street. And that means holding opposition politicians like Keir Starmer, who justified war crimes. They all need to be held to account. That's how we'll fight for the memories of these journalists. Solidarity, let's never give up.
Thank you very much.